Happy Thursday and welcome to today's continuation of the Tech Bytes takeover about the Gartner Magic Quadrant. I am Rick Vanover, the Rickatron, and I have a very special guest, one of my favorite co-conspirators on the project, Emilee Tellez. How you doing today?
I'm doing good. I think this is my first Tech Bites all year, believe it or not. So I'm glad to be here.
I was thinking it had been a while, but Emilee, for those who don't know, she rocks it here in our product strategy team, integrated with so many different parts of our business. And when it comes to the Gartner Magic Quadrant, everyone, she is super important to some of the things. And that's where we are going to spend our time today. So we would like to ask you to let us know where you are tuning in from. I'm in Central Ohio, and we got a triple production situation going on. We've got Jeffrey live from the Barncade, and we also have Felicia in Dallas, and we also have Mark running the show in the ATL, and Emilee is based in Arizona. I think you might be traveling this week. I'm not sure, but let's just leave it at Arizona. Before we get into it, Emilee, first of all, for those viewers that just joined us on YouTube, we had a little bit of a air quote fun with one of the streams. So one of the streams, LinkedIn, did not play ball with us today. So we are live on several others, but we'll be sure to post this as a standalone asset on LinkedIn. But Emilee, before we jump into the Magic Quadrant, I think, as long as you've been on the team, you've been involved with our output there. What's kind of your take of the work to get our entry in? We talked about that with Leah, but I'd really like to hear your perspective on that.
So I think for me, in specifically coming from like a sales or field SE role, right? I'm very used to that type of intake where it's usually a request for product, for information, et cetera. So I'm used to the format. But what I didn't expect was how thorough it was going to get from the list of questions and from okay, you answered yes here, but now you need to go through and explain in so many words, right? How is this achievable? And then going back into the outcome. So what the one thing that I always like to, share back with others that don't know what this process looks like when you're entering in for any type of research report, there is a lot of team members that are jumping in and working on this night and day to answer because of the bank of what it feels like it's 1,000 questions. It feels like it's never ending, but there's so much that goes into it, and rechecking information that gets put in there and just double checking even the amount of words that could be utilized to answer a certain question. So I think getting into the very specific request that Gartner or that an analyst team is actually looking for when you're answering the questions was kind of the shocking point for me, because I'm used to just being like, oh, absolutely, we can do that. Let me explain it to you in 3 paragraphs, and it's like, no, you actually only have 150 words, and please choose your words carefully. So for me, that was kind of like the okay, let's lift the shades, figure this out. So that was probably the more of the shocking points, but it's a time crunch, and the minute it gets delivered and it's ready to go, to you're working day and night on it to make sure that everything is fully completed, and then the submission, and then just the wait and see, how did we do? So that's always, it's been a very interesting, a unique experience, one that I've appreciated being a part of for the last couple of years.
Yeah, that wait and see is real because it's not unreasonable when I say, and I said this with Leah, that we really spend the whole month of March working on this. That is
Hmm.
like nothing is more important that month when it comes to this. So, and the one thing I'll add, especially when you think about some of the product capabilities, you mentioned your time as an SE, which is super valuable to help us, formulate this and then do the bigger picture of our product strategy stuff. No customer has all of the stuff that's in this questionnaire, right? So you take any typical customer, they got this, they got that, they're using that cloud. But this questionnaire talks about every cloud, every type of OS, every type of hypervisor, every type of software as a service. It's massive, and it truly is a team effort. So Emilee is probably, at least in my team, the biggest partner in crime. But then, I can't I'd be remiss if I didn't thank Kirsten and Emilee and Andre and Ben Young and Brad Lynch and I'm forgetting several people on our team. But some of the friendlies that you've seen here on Tech Bites and other Veeam stuff, it's definitely a team effort. So let's take a look at our first slide here. And if you haven't seen it, go on over to veeam.com. Trust me, you can't miss it. All things lead to veeam.com. And then on that page, you can get a link to download the Magic Quadrant. I highly recommend everyone take a read of this. It is one of those things where it doesn't just talk about Veeam, the asset. It gives a very balanced comparative view of the different players of the market. There's some new ones. There's some ones that dropped off. There's some consolidation in the market, but it's really one of those things that I think gives a really good decision maker perspective to the backup and data protection platforms market. Now, Emilee, I know when I talk to customers and partners, this is absolutely a conversation starter. How do you use it? I know you and I and all the different members of the team talk to customers, partners, et cetera, differently. But has the Magic Quadrant ever come up in a customer conversation?
Always, especially with any of my larger customers that I'm engaging with, or even prospects, specifically because there's so much out there as far as vendor capabilities, tech stacks, product offerings. So, having kind of a way to, summarize all of that up and just give me your top ones with the most in-depth research of items that I need to be thinking about, or what should be possibly at risk, or what are some things that are pros, um, is huge. And so I don't think I've ever walked into a customer organization that didn't know what the Gartner Magic Quadrant was, or wasn't already utilizing it, or we didn't have the meeting because they saw our name on the Gartner Magic Quadrant and they said we had to meet with you because we see you are one of the top leaders, and that's obviously something that we need to do our due diligence on. So it gets utilized from a lot of those different types of aspects. What my favorite thing probably about it, and now even actually being on the team and getting to work on it for the last couple of years, is that we could actually track what we're doing from this is what happened last year, and this is how we scored, and these were the risks that were associated to it, or these were our pros that were associated to it. And now look at us this year, right? Did we answer some of their concerns that they had about us last year? Were those addressed inside of this year's Gartner MQ? What were some of the additional pros that maybe they didn't see us as, a high ranking from last year, but now it's definitely making a bigger statement this year. So for me, it's just taking through those different areas with different customers and partners to say, look, like every time we see some of these risks or these cons that are associated with any type of analyst firm, the one benefit that's from Veeam is that we've always answered the call of, okay, well, let's look to how we can address that so that way next year, that's not something that you're going to see from us again.
Yeah, that's a super important point because you don't want to see like this, especially in the cautions area. You don't want to see repeated entries there. And I just got word from the producers for some of the streams that we were able to push out the link. And if you're just watching and not, able to click the link on one of the other socials, just go on over to veeam.com. You can download this report. And actually, a really important point that you made me think about, Emilee, is you don't have to be a Gartner client to get this asset from
Mhm.
Gartner at veeam.com. A lot of organizations may subscribe to some of the other analyst firms, but this is a research asset from Gartner. You don't have to be a Gartner client to engage. So we're going to talk now. We're going to pivot straight away to one of the core strengths that is mentioned in the report. You got to read the report. But this was probably very relevant to you, Emilee. You've done a lot with our security teams. One of the strengths that were called out was the broad cybersecurity ransomware protection. And, this is the power of three, we like to call it. And why don't you introduce this solution stack to everyone right now?
Oh, absolutely. So when we talk about security, right, one of the things that I have actually loved about Veeam and the way that we approach security is it's not just a one-man band, right? We need to have all these different layers and these different perspectives in order to build a true cybersecurity strategy. And that's the core functionality for like a defense in depth. So Veeam took the same approach when it came to innovation, which was wonderful, right? So we look at it from these three pieces here. So number one is the innovation within product itself. So what are things that we can be doing within our Veeam data platform to help organizations or to help security analysts and teams to be able to understand what's happening in the back end when we are doing processing of their data. So the 8 security scanning capabilities, either before, during, or after a backup, are key there, because not only can we capture something in line while we're actually processing the data, but if you have something that's dormant or something that has gone amiss because the EDR or whatever tool that you're utilizing didn't pick it up, well, now we have a way that we could go back from a historical viewpoint, leverage those old restore points, and be able to scan through multiple iterations, leveraging other tools and technologies, whether that's through AV signature scans, right? Or if we're going to leverage something like Yara, or even looking for items like indicators of compromise, where we know threat actors use very specific tools or toolkits in order to perform exfiltrations of data. So this is what's going to be that portion of what we built into innovation for the product itself. Now, we don't want to just stand on saying, well, Veeam has these scanning capabilities, so you don't need a security tool. No, 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 that is not the case, right? So we looked at what we could do from a partnership perspective to bring that holistic view to those customers and to those organizations. So from a partnerships perspective, this has just expanded immensely. So over 65 security vendors from SIM, SOAR, ITSM, EDR, NDR, right? NDR tools, all of those. We kind of built in different integrations where they're actually available on their own marketplaces. So we launched starting with Sophos. We added in Splunk. We did an integration with Palo Alto Networks. We added in a new integration this year with CrowdStrike, and we're continuing to iterate and develop these partnerships and these co-innovation strategies between both R&D teams, and take in how we process data from how we see it from our events internally, from our own scanning, but then also what do these tools see in production, and is there a way that they can trigger some by communication to send that information back to us, so then we are aware of anything that they're capturing in production can also be seen as malicious while we're processing a backup. So there's a lot of information that's happening there that's being bubbled up into the security team, so that way they could see it within their overall dashboard. And then finally, probably my favorite subject to talk about, and probably the one that I spend the most time on, is our Coveware by Veeam. So this was an acquisition that we did last year in March. Essentially, they lead the industry when it comes to cyber extortion readiness, as well as responding to organizations that have been impacted by ransomware that need that additional expertise to come in and help be that intelligence layer when it comes to extortion that has happened from a breach, from a ransomware incident, from a exfiltration type of event that has happened, and they're that additional layer that sits on the side and can help to provide information back to customers on what next steps should they be thinking about when they are either having conversations with a threat actor or their internal legal teams, etc. So the covert piece has been huge, and there's Veeam is probably the only vendor, it's actually the only vendor that has this incident response team that's available for our customers.
Yeah, so a lot to unpack there, and I think your voice is going, Emilee. So maybe take a chug here for a moment.
It has been a long week, yes.
Yeah, it's been a week. So I want to double down on that one. I'm going to get my Zoomery going in right here, but Coveware by Veeam. I've been at Veeam 15 years. A lot of people know that. This has been by far one of the smartest moves that I personally think we've done, period. And we are the only provider with that in-house incident response, a data pipeline, and then special tooling to get there. So many others in the space will kind of make this part of the solution sit in their partnerships world, whereas we actually have it in-house. So it's absolutely fantastic, and the innovation is strong as well. And here's the best part, Emilee, as you know, self shameless promotion that Emilee and I, what was that, May? We did Security Field Day 13, and the whole session, 2-hour session, was about our security strategy, because the thought here is all of this, the innovation, the partnerships, and Coveware by Veeam, all of this transpired in the last 3 years. Or sorry, 2 years. It was in the last 2 years. So the power of three happened in the last 2 years. And it was one of those things that it was crazy, the amount of innovation. Because side note, another analyst inquiry had us do on a biannual cycle. And it was like, we just realized all of this technology, at least for that firm, was new. So it was a lot to kind of bring them up to speed on. But anyway, side note, Security Field Day 13, you can watch those streams and check that out. And we really want to own this very strong comprehensive threat detection recovery, the partnerships, Coveware by Veeam. I put all of that together as the Veeam difference. But probably one of the things, Emilee, that organizations are going to use most often, day to day, would be these threat detection capabilities. And so I'm going to ask you to pick a favorite and then save one for me to talk about.
Sure, yeah. So I'll talk about the Coveware Recon Scanner, since that was a technology that was brought over from the Coveware team. So essentially how this tool was developed to help them understand forensic investigation of what happens when it happens, of a user or organization being under attack, and then how can they kind of understand these TTPs, and that stands for techniques, tactics, and procedures. So how do these threat actors move once they infiltrate an environment, and then how can they leverage that for, building out their case and understanding how they have to kind of go to bat against some of these threat actors. And then on top of that, they leverage this information to provide proactive training to organizations. So that's the one key thing that I want to hit on here. It's not just about having all the best tools and having all the cool scanning capabilities, et cetera, right? It's being proactive, and what can we do? What can we take from lessons learned and put that information forward, so that way when customers want to understand what are some things that they could do to harden their defenses, or to, be able to perform better when it comes to any type of breach or incident that occurs, being able to provide that information from the forensic investigations that they've done through the Recon scanner is also going to help to funnel in and build out some of those trainings and those protocols. So it's an awesome piece that we brought in from our technology side to be able to identify potential issues before they actually gain access and start, making a muck out of everything inside of the Veeam environment or the data protection environment. But essentially, a lot of this is also feeding into that data pipeline, so that way we could build some more proactive strategies.
Yeah, so one of the ones I like in the comprehensive threat detection is the security and compliance analyzer. This is a really good way that works in conjunction with the Veeam Threat Hunter to Threat Center, to try to build your overall resilience score. So I talk to organizations all the time. And so, if you're a practitioner, this is one of those things you can actually up your game when it comes to your footprint here of just best practices and security footprint of the Veeam infrastructure, because really the Veeam infrastructure is a very important one when it comes to incidents and such. We're quickly running out of time. We're at the 19-minute mark, but anything else on this one you want to talk about, Emilee?
No, I mean, the other two we kind of hit on briefly earlier before, so, but I'm
Yeah.
excited to get to the during backup.
Yeah.
Yeah. So during backup, I'll go ahead and I'll cover the indicators of compromise scanner, because this is something that was new that came in one of our latest versions or latest releases late last year, right? So it was expanding kind of the way that we look for indicators of compromise within the data set itself. So how can we identify known tools that hackers generally utilize to perform exfiltration techniques? So this is very new. It's unique to the market, specifically because now now we have a way that we can kind of identify different types of behaviors based off of what we're using or what we're seeing from a historical viewpoint on the backups or the restore points themselves, right? So let's take, for example, if we have a machine and this machine has been backed up and there's been nothing, nothing installed on it, and then all of a sudden we get a backup that runs and we see something like FileZilla that's been deployed on this machine. FileZilla may be not a risky tool, but in the hands of the wrong person can be very so much so at-risk tool. So this is going to be some of the items here that we're going to be able to identify to let organizations know, hey, you're using some of these tools that are utilized for copying or moving data out. Was this done on purpose? Was this done with intent? What are some things that we can kind of circumvent to dive into this deeper?
Yeah, and I love that one. And my favorite on this list would be the immutable backup. And I like to say, if you are an IT practitioner or even a decision maker, and you don't have one or more ultra resilient media copies, which would be something that's like immutable, offline, or air gapped, that is a plausible emergency. And talk to your Veeam team right away. But the reality is there's no excuse nowadays to not have something immutable. And Veeam makes it arguably the easiest in the market. One option, the hardened repository on Linux, is completely free. There's also Veeam Data Cloud Vault, which is a great way to build your backups off-site, hosted in Azure with a special type of storage account provided by Veeam. And then there's, I think, over 60 object storage immutable qualified partners out there. There's Cloud Connect, Insider Protection. There's no excuse nowadays on how to get it. And here's a zinger, Emilee, and I know we put this in when we did our response for the Gartner Magic Quadrant. Got to get this right. A lot of people know I'm here in Central Ohio. We have one of our tech support centers based here with over 500,000 customers. We don't have a tech support case on record of an organization unable to recover data in a ransomware scenario if they had their backups in an immutable repository like a bucket and they had their encryption key. Don't lose your encryption key. Really important, but this really speaks to the volume of how powerful this can be, and everything from zero trust data resilience, separating the backup from the storage control plane. This is really powerful, and these are the types of things that I think truly matter today.
Absolutely.
All right, moving along. Let's go to the threat detection part 3 after the backup. Why don't you pick one and I'll pick one as well.
Sure. So I'll talk a little bit about the orchestrated restore in clean rooms, right? Because so much so we have to think about how do we handle, a mass recovery at scale. And so with the orchestration, essentially that's building out these incident response plans or these recovery plans, but essentially making sure we have a way to validate and to test those. So not only are we going to make sure that these machines come up and you don't have any blue screens, but then essentially how do we go in and dive a little bit deeper to make sure that we're not recovering anything that could be malicious or suspicious into a new clean environment. But then on top of that, how can customers leverage their current investment for what they might have already built for their clean rooms and be able to take some of that data and go through processes and testing capabilities or tabletop capabilities with their security teams to go through and validate how would we actually go through a response if we were to have a breach or have a ransomware incident where data was now encrypted or corrupted. So orchestrated restore in clean rooms is something that Veeam has been offering in the market for more than 5 years now. We've had orchestrated recovery capabilities as well as the ability for customers to build their own, I'll call it a virtual clean room, right, where we can spin up a separate environment, completely kind of fenced off in its own separate network and do our own scanning capabilities there for customers to do some additional testing. But we're just expanding this so that way users that have true physical hardware that they want to be able to leverage it to go through the process of testing and validating the recoveries are going to work is going to be very critical to the market, especially living inside of this world where it's not a matter of if, but a matter of when, and also how bad is that damage going to possibly be.
Or how often or how many times, that's the other factor, right? How frequent. The one that I'll highlight and amplify here, which is, again, we're still on one of the strengths, the strong ransomware protection strength. That's in this year's Gartner Magic Quadrant. And if you haven't seen it, just as a quick go back here, you can download this Gartner Magic Quadrant at veeam.com, get your own copy, get your own take on these capabilities that we're talking about. And the one thing I'll pick on, or highlight, not pick on, is Threat Hunter. And I actually got that confused with Threat Center just a moment ago. But Threat Hunter is a really, really good way to do those signature-based scans once the data is under management by Veeam. And what I mean by that is once it's on a backup repository, you can make these sure backup jobs just do this Threat Hunter scan automatically. So this is a really powerful way to have that additional confidence that your data is threat free. So if you have heard us talk about the 3-2-1-1-0 rule, this is one of those zero things. No surprises. You can take the backup, have it under management by Veeam, and know that it's threat free from this signature scan. So it's a real-time database. It's really effective in that regard. And so every step of the way, you have these very, very powerful capabilities to protect your data against ransomware. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, and all of this is new in the last 2 years. And so I think, Emilee, when we go into customers and talk about this, it's one of those, have you seen Veeam lately? And this is a really powerful stack right now.
Absolutely.
All right. So a couple comments here from the producers here. Looking good, a good viewership. Thanks everyone for dealing with us with the stream situations here. I want to talk briefly about one of the other strengths that are out there, and that's the data portability. And that can be like, whoa, if something goes wrong, no, don't adjust your television. Sometimes bad things can happen to good data. And the thought here is that Veeam backups are absolutely portable. And I use that word absolutely, all caps, bold, underlined. It's a real deal. What I mean by that is there is no prior infrastructure knowledge to drive recovery with Veeam. And this is unique in the market, which is one of the reasons why it was highlighted as a strength in the Gartner Magic Quadrant. So what this means is that a Veeam backup that is, quote, sitting in the cloud, on a disk, on a tape, hosted in a service provider, just the data, the files. You can drive absolute recovery from that with no prior infrastructure knowledge. In fact, I do it all the time. I moved my lab. It actually was hilarious. I moved it from one rack on the left to one rack on the right via the cloud because I didn't want to, propagate any bad design decisions in 2023 when we stood up our new lab. I sent the backups to the cloud, and that was actually easier than, having these other types of scenarios. That's not the same for every player in the market. This also leads to incredible capabilities around platform conversion. I remember distinctly in 2016 when we launched the direct restore to Microsoft Azure capability, which was our first platform conversion. And it's one of those things that sometimes you want to, sometimes you need to make a change. And you could put in some of the hypervisor market conditions that are out there. You could really get into physical to virtual scenarios with hardware failures or just platform modernization. You could entertain cloud migration. You can entertain cloud repatriation. I think you got a good story about that one, Emilee. And you could also entertain just moving workloads around physical, virtual, cloud. And the same actually goes, and we don't talk enough about this, but the same goes for our unstructured data, like our file. NAS backups, great way to move to a new file server. But I'm sure this one comes up a lot as well for you, Emilee.
Always, and it's kind of that rinse and repeat story. When I started, it was hey, if our hardware vendor does something and irks us, right, we want to be able to swap over from them. But if we're locked in to having to leverage their solution for not just our production workloads, but our data protection, well, now we need to change our entire data protection strategy, right? And that's not something that maybe a lot of large organizations or even smaller public sector based organizations can really afford to do. So the fact that you have a technology or a vendor that can kind of go with the flow, that can support you with whatever hardware you're leveraging today versus the next one that you might be utilizing tomorrow, or if you have a leader that now says, okay, everybody, we need to go cloud first, and let's start talking about this digital transformation strategy that we're going to implement, right? It's always great for customers to be able to think when you have a migration or when you have a big change, right? The one thing you need to have is a backup. You need to have a data protection plan. You need to have a strategy put in place that's going to help you throughout that process, because we all know during migrations, they're never going to be smooth. There's always going to be something that possibly can go wrong. And that's one of the reasons that backup is so critical and data protection is so critical to be able to recover. So the fact that we can move with you at your own pace, no matter where your data decides to live, is one of the biggest pieces that, and I'm glad that Gartner has called that out in this specific report.
Indeed, we have been hitting that from the rooftops, to quote Michael Cade, for a long time, and it is glad to see that it finally has been recognized. Okay, we just want to end one more time with the Gartner Magic Quadrant. You can download it now. Just go on over to veeam.com. You can get a free copy of this report. You do not have to be a Gartner client. And that is where we're going to leave it here today. Emilee, thank you so much for joining me on today's Tech Bites.
Thank you.
All right, I want to give a big shout out and a thank you to all the interesting things that happen behind the scenes. Mark, Felicia, Jeffrey from the Barncade. You guys make us look good. Thank you so much, our producers. Next week, no industry insights, but we will have a very special Tech Bites National Intern Day, 31st July. Be there. Intern Takeover. You heard it first. They've got some really cool stuff. Thanks for watching, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.